So we're going to talk mostly about the economy, but before we get started, I wanted to hear a little bit about yourself and your background, your upbringing, where you were born, where you grew up, and the kinds of experiences you had that kind of pushed you in this line of work.
Okay, that's a good opening question. I was born and raised in Boston, actually the south end of Boston. Born and raised in the south end of Boston of Cape Verdean immigrant parents, which Alisha can appreciate. And it was the proverbial poor neighborhood. Some people said it was the poorest neighborhood in the city at that time, growing up in the 50s. There was some reason to believe that it was, because in the 60s it became an urban renewal area, the whole neighborhood. And in fact, it was the largest urban renewal area in the country for a while. The whole neighborhood was deemed an urban renewal area. And growing up as a teenager and watching things change in your neighborhood, I was very fascinated by all the changes that government, was making in my neighborhood. But it never really hit home until the Boston Redevelopment Authority came knocking on my door and said, "Look, we're getting ready to take this block down. You have to move." And I was born and raised on that street, West Rutland Square.
West Brooklyn?
West Rutland Square.
Rutland. Okay.
West Rutland Square off Columbus Ave. I was born and raised there, went to school, church, had friends. You can imagine, the whole world was centered on that street. And now it was being taken away from me because of a word called eminent domain, a concept that I had never heard of. I was, I think, in the 10th grade. So they wanted to move us into either public housing or some new subsidized housing in the neighborhood. I, being the oldest of a family of 4, and a teenager, I wasn't too thrilled in terms of doing that. I wanted to stay where I was. However, they were adamant, you got to go, we're going to move into this public or subsidized housing. And that was going to be it. And I just felt such a sense of hopelessness. My parents didn't quite totally understand, so as the oldest in an immigrant family, I probably spoke to the relocation worker probably more than most kids would have. But we were lucky. Across the street, they only took down half the block. Across the street there was an apartment. So we were able to move there, and so I basically was able to continue my high school years, and my mother actually lived there for another 15 years, and so we actually were able to stay. But the impact, never left me. And I when I started college, at Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire, I was still thinking about that. So I decided to major in government, and my minor was urban studies. Okay?
Yeah.
And then when I was considering what to do after Dartmouth, I was thinking about law school, but then I said, you know what, I'm still really interested in this government and urban studies. And I found out that there was a master's in city planning. So I went to the University of Pennsylvania, and I received a master's in city planning, and I focused in on housing there. In fact, I had a fellowship at the Philadelphia Housing Development Corporation. I was an intern there. I didn't intend to come back to Boston. I wanted to stay in Philadelphia. The racial climate in Boston has never been good. Post-busing, pre-busing, it's never been good. Maybe it was good maybe 200 years ago when they had the abolitionists, but I certainly never saw Boston being friendly to people of color, ever. So I didn't have any desire to come back. I wanted to stay in Philadelphia, but not having worked, I went straight through school from kindergarten all the way through the master's, not having really worked a full-time job, and being in a recession in 1975, it was hard getting a job, and it was really hard getting a job in Philadelphia. I put one resume in Boston at the Boston Redevelopment Authority, the very people that had displaced us. And as fate would have it, they were looking for a planner for the Roxbury neighborhood, and the Roxbury neighborhood was where I went to high school. And they were looking for a planner, and I had been looking for a job maybe 5 months, and all of a sudden they were intrigued by the possibilities of having somebody that had, that had the master's in city planning, knew Boston, knew those neighborhoods, and they hired me.
Did you tell them about your background?
I think I did, and I think that they were intrigued by it because I would have been the first person that had been displaced to be on the planning staff, and I think they thought that would be helpful because they had gone through so much angst because of what they did to the West End. In the West End, they had leveled that neighborhood, and they had really received a lot of criticism. People wrote books about how that's not the way you do urban development. So they were pretty sensitive to citizen participation by the time I was applying for a job back in the mid '70s. So they probably saw this as a good way to sensitize staff in terms of how the people that they were planning for might feel about certain efforts that the planning staff was thinking of, and they were looking for somebody who didn't have a whole lot of experience because it was really a junior planner position. So I kind of fit that niche perfectly almost. They said Roxborough. I said Roxborough. I went to high school in Roxborough from the South End. I said, oh my goodness, and went to a credible school.
Yeah.
It just kind of was like meant to be, but I did find it ironic that of all the places that I was going to work, my first real job, it was going to be that agency that displaced my family. I think it was 9 years to the day almost.
Wow.
9 years to the day. Here I am back. No longer a 10th grader, but now I'm working my first job as a professional, and I'm in a place that I had wrote papers about, undergrad, about how government, is not the friend of the community, and how not to do economic development. They were like not my friends. When I was in college, I wrote a lot of papers, and they were the foil.
And what made you come to Providence?
I came here because there was a lack of opportunity in Boston, particularly for people of color, and I had worked about 15 years, and I just, the racial climate I was just getting tired of all the racism in Boston. I think that was probably the main reason. I wasn't necessarily looking at Providence. I was looking at anything outside of Boston. I felt, I needed to leave. I'd worked 15 years, and I just was tired of all the same old battles. I just was losing hope that people of color would ever be accepted, for who they are.
I know a lot of people have a different definition of racism.
Yeah.
What is the definition for you? What are some of those examples that you saw in Boston that you may not see in Providence? Or
Well, no, I see them.
Okay.
I see them. No, people that, that were receiving positions because of who they knew, not based on their qualifications. I don't want anybody to give me any more than I deserve, but don't give me any less. I worked hard, played by the rules, and I rise and fall on my own merits. And when I saw certain people rising up, and I couldn't understand, because of who they were, I saw that there was all this nepotism and all this cronyism, and it wasn't based on the merits. It wasn't based on the merits, and people of color was really, really suffering in that. A lot of black professionals at that time that left Boston because they just threw up their hands because they said this is an unfair playing field, and it's just not working. And I'm not saying that it's any different here.
Well, Providence kind of has that reputation.
It's well deserved. It's well deserved. I'm not saying it's any worse than Boston. I don't think any place is worse than Boston. But Providence is up there. You got to look at who's the best qualified. And even if they are a person of color, and even if they have no family connections, that's okay. That's okay. You want to put your best team on the field to win the game. And that's a better Rhode Island. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about helping relatives and family. If you want to do that, you give them extra large birthday and Christmas presents or tickets to the Red Sox, and then let them go. But you don't hire them. Why would you do that? You hurt yourself, you hurt your agency, you hurt your community, you hurt the state. And you don't hire the best. You need to hire the best. And you might feel a little uncomfortable because they might not look like you. But eventually you'll say to yourself, you know what, I'm glad I did that. Now we're all better. We're all better. And Rhode Island has to start learning that. Boston has to learn that. There's still too much of a double standard that's going on in terms of hiring.
Did you spend those 15 years in the same job, or did you have different?
No, I moved around.
Yeah.
You know, I spent about half the time working for the city, and about roughly a quarter of the time working in the private sector, and the other quarter of the time working in the for the state under Michael Dukakis.
Was your first Providence job Rhode Island housing?
No, I was the housing coordinator for the city of East Providence.
Oh.
See, and I was glad. You know, I knew that East Providence had a lot of Cape Verdeans, and I had never lived in a Cape Verdean community. It's just my family, and I was intrigued by that. So I said, wow, I get to stay in housing. Now I'm going to learn about Cape Verdeans, my community. So I was excited. I'm getting ready to leave Boston, so I was really happy about that. And, you know, even though I wasn't thinking about Rhode Island, I was thinking about Atlanta, Charlotte, whatever. But I saw an ad in a neighborhood paper in Boston. They were advertising for a housing coordinator. And I said, that's the best affirmative action initiative I've ever seen. Not only did they were advertising in the Boston Globe and Boston Herald for the East Providence Housing Coordinator, but they also were advertising in the Bay State Banner, which is the equivalent of the Providence American.
Okay.
Now, different times, different budgets. We're talking about 22 years ago. But I, at the time, was looking for an opportunity. And when I saw that, and I used to read the paper every Thursday, when I saw that they were looking for a housing coordinator in the city of East Providence, I said, you know what? Let me check Rhode Island out. And I don't know anybody there, but you know what? The idea of staying in housing and also, for the first time, living and working among Cape Verdeans, that intrigued me. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go to. I'm going to try. I'm going to apply. I'm going to see what happens. And even though I didn't know anybody, I got the job. And people were stunned later that I got the job. They said, how in the world did you get that job not knowing anybody? I said, well, I don't think it's because I wear nice suits and root for the Red Sox. I think maybe 15 years experience and 2 Ivy League degrees might have a little bit to do with it. Not a lot, a little bit. You know, but they couldn't believe. It doesn't matter what your credentials or what experience. Some people here, you know, how did you get the job? You not know anybody. You could be a Rhodes Scholar. How'd you get that job?
Yeah. Did that mentality bring you into NAACP?
No. Originally, it didn't. I worked. I was on one board, Self-Help, which I've been on that board now, and it's called East Bay Community Action Program for 21 years, and I've been the president of that board for 8 years. So I'm very proud of that. They came to me and said, you know, we need help. We're a community action program. We think a person like you can add something to our organization. I was flattered by that. Dennis Roy came to my office at City Hall, Planning Department, East Providence, and I said, you know what, I don't know anybody in Rhode Island. This could be a way to get to know more people. And if I can add something, then, you know, if he feels I can, then maybe I can. And so I was flattered by that, and continue to be flattered by it, But it wasn't until 1993 when one of the students in the Planning Department at URI, who I work with, Fiamma Witcher, who now is the head of Genesis Center, she was a grad student, and I was helping her with a project in grad school. She was saying, have you ever considered joining the Urban League board or whatever? I said, no, I hadn't really thought about it. I hadn't really thought about joining too many other boards at the time. I was fine with self-help and my job. But I said, you know what? This could be a way of getting to know people in Providence. This could be a way of really getting to know African Americans and Latinos. And I said, this is an opportunity. So let me consider being on this board. So I joined the board and got to know people. And 6 years later, I was president of the board of the Urban League. Voted in 1999, which I thought was amazing, coming from Boston, not really knowing anybody. And here I am, within 10 years, being the president of the Urban League of Rhode Island. You know, I saw it as an opportunity, but I guess if you just, you know, if you're committed and you go to meetings and you do what you have to do, I guess you can be president of almost anything these days. So, you know, through that job, or through that position, I could really see that things were, I always thought things were a little bit better in Boston, but I thought that there was a lot of problems. I didn't see people of color and senior management anywhere. And I said, wow, this doesn't, I don't understand this. I mean, I would see maybe one or two, but I'd say, I know so many people with talent that really should be in these places. And then I talked to the people that were in those positions, and I was left really underwhelmed. And I'm like, I'm a fair guy. Worked hard, played by the rules. Nobody gave me anything, you know. And I said, I'm not expecting any more, but I don't want any less. And I know the difference between people. And I said, you know, this is not right. It's not helping anybody. Why don't agencies and companies get the best? What would be wrong with that? It works in sports. You know, you diversify your team to win in sports. You wouldn't go in the stock market without thinking about diversifying, you know, stocks. Only when it comes to employment do we forget those basic premises of diversity. You know, if you didn't have diversity in sports or stocks, your team would be a perennial loser and you'd lose your shirt. All right? So people understand that, but yet when it comes to employment, they forget all that. It doesn't work anywhere, and especially in employment, in boards. It really doesn't.
That's a good segue to talk about the economy.
Okay.
And the effects of the recent Great Recession on blacks and whites. There's some statistics by the Economic Policy Institute that says in 2004, the median worth of white households was just over $34,000. For black households, it was $13,450. By 2009, the median net worth for white households had fallen 24%, but the median black net worth had fallen a whopping 83%.
Mm-hmm.
So the director of EPI's program on race, ethnicity, and the economy described the wealth gap this way. In 2009, for every dollar of wealth the average white household had, black households had only 2 cents.
Yeah.
So the question is, did the recession wipe out any economic gains blacks made before the recession? And if so, how are they coping?
Well, you know, those are some dramatic statistics. Yeah. And I think, you know, when people talk about the vestiges of slavery, clearly you can see that, you know, the impact of slavery, we still have not come close to overcoming that evil institution, because that directly speaks to that in Jim Crow and the denial of blacks' mortgages, you know, by government, restricted covenants, all of that has not put people of color in a positive position in terms of wealth accumulation. Now, unfortunately for people of color, blacks in particular, a lot of the wealth is wrapped up in your home. So when you have the foreclosure crisis, or we're having the foreclosure crisis, we're still in it, that's going to disproportionately impact people of color, because people of color have a disproportionate amount of their wealth tied up in homes. So the recession has disproportionately affected blacks or people of color because of where the wealth was concentrated before the recession. But in terms of that disparity, in terms of whites having 20 times more wealth than blacks, that's a direct result of the fact that even though we've had Emancipation Proclamation, Brown versus the Board of Education, all those things, we still haven't won the hearts and minds of the majority of the people in the country in terms of leveling the playing field and playing fair. Government up until the 60s was a barrier to blacks accumulating wealth, and in policies of not having blacks move out to the suburbs where there could be better schools, which would mean that people would have better potential to get better jobs. All of that has led us to this point, unfortunately.
Some other dramatic statistics involving unemployment. Nationally, black unemployment is rising. It was 14.3% in October, but more stunning were the statistics for the jobless rate among African American teens, 40.5%, rising from 36.7% in September. Yet the U.S. unemployment rate is only 7.9%, although it's higher here. Are minorities having the same tough time finding jobs here as elsewhere in the nation, or is it worse when you have a state where the unemployment rate is second highest in the nation?
I would say intuitively it's worse, because you get more people looking, so there's more competition. But it speaks to the poor education system and the poverty. Poverty, you're 3 times more likely to be poor if you're black or Latino than white in this state. Okay, that is a real sad reality. that we don't look at that and internalize that and feel an outrage enough. That we are never going to get anywhere as a state as long as that's the case. It's impossible. You can talk about all the economic development strategies you want, but you're just in denial. Until you understand that close to 40% of this state is people of color, close to 40%, because I looked at the census before I came down here, okay, non-Hispanic white, I tried to look at all that. Close to 40%, I was surprised. When you basically ignore that kind of percentage of a population, there's nothing you really can do to help yourself. There really isn't. The dropout rates among blacks are, I don't know how many times that of whites. The college graduation rates are, a fraction of the white graduation rate. And we need more people in this state to have at least an associate's degree or better. Well, if you project it out, we're going to have less because we got more people of color in this state and it's growing. So if you don't do something to fix that, then percentage-wise you're going to have less people in the future with associates or better if you just do the math. It just doesn't. You just can't ignore 40% of the population, which has been ignored, and think you're going to have a good outcome at the end of the night. It's denial, it's delusion. It just is in this kind of marketplace.
Why do you think young African Americans are particularly having such a hard time finding jobs here?
Well, because young African Americans basically have either have dropped out of high school or have a GED or just have a high school diploma, and that's it. They don't have an advanced degree. So in America today, we're in the so-called service or knowledge economy. If you don't have an advanced degree or at least a vocational certificate of some sort, then you are up against it in terms of your chance of being employed. So, there's a disproportionate amount of people of color, blacks in particular, that do not have an associate's degree or better. So you're going to find higher unemployment rates among any group that doesn't have that today. It's not back in the 50s where you could get a job working with your hands and manufacturing or whatever and have a living wage and have your wife home taking care of the kids. That's the Leave It to Beaver era that some people would want to harken back to, but that's gone. That's not coming back. We're in a different world, we're in a different society based on education and training and whatever, and our schools have failed us in terms of that population. The facts don't lie. I mean, if the Red Sox come in last place, then probably the manager hasn't done a good job. Probably. Players haven't done a good job. So why wouldn't it be the same in terms of people of color dropping out at astronomical rates, not going on to college? Somebody failed. You can't continue to blame the victim. I mean, there's responsibility certainly with families, and I was the first to say that you have to toughen it out. Things might not be fair, but you still can't just throw up your hands. You've got to keep working at it. What are you going to do? You can't give up. So I would tell any family, you got to look at reality. You got to go on and get trained. You got to get an advanced degree. You have to do that. You have to figure out whatever way you got to do that. But I also understand the institutional biases and the barriers that also exist too. Swimming upstream.
So what's the NAACP's role in that structure and that failing?
The NAACP is an advocate. We are a voice for the voiceless. Part of my role is talking to people like yourself, talking to media to try to raise the issues, to try to make sure that we have an honest discussion of what's going on and not a pretend discussion of what's going on. And hopefully the movers and the shakers will feel that enough is enough and we're going to do something. We're going to correct this problem because the fate of our state, all of us, really depends on it. We just have our state is too diverse. We're not Vermont or North Dakota, where they don't have this diverse. They don't have the diversity. We do. So if we don't tackle the diversity and inclusion equity issue, then we will never have meaningful economic development in the state. It's just impossible. It doesn't make sense. You can't have an underclass. We can't afford to take care of an underclass. You have tax-paying people working hard, working 2 or 3 jobs just to stay ahead. We can't ask them to support an underclass. We're in a humane society. We're not going to take people that can't run as fast or jump as high and put them up against the wall and shoot them. We got to do something. So we got to take care of them. Why don't we have those people take care of themselves? Give them the tools and the education so that they can be tax producers. So that they are helping pull the wagon as opposed to riding in the wagon. That just makes sense to me, but it doesn't happen because people don't feel comfortable, I think, with people of color. They think it's somebody else's problem, it's not affecting me, and they could be more wrong. It is affecting them because they're supporting this underclass. I mean, $41,000 a year at the ACI, non-productive tax dollars as far as I'm concerned. Warehousing people, and then you tell me they can't live in certain places, they can't get certain jobs, so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy for them to go back. So the recidivism rate is only going to be but so low. It's just a vicious cycle. We have the 8th highest disparity in terms of black-white incarceration rates in this country. Only 7 states have a bigger disparity between white and black incarceration. Incarceration rates, the difference in terms of blacks and whites, we're 8th in the country in that disparity. And I got the source here. All right, and also in terms of I think drug offenses, I think blacks are 30 times more likely to be incarcerated than whites. We got to end that. That's not helping us. That's not helping anybody. It's just not helping anybody. If blacks and people of color had the same kind of educational achievement as whites, I think there was a statistic I saw, we'd have close to $500 million more personal income here in Rhode Island. Something like that. If the education was at the same par, there'd be more like $500 million more personal income for our state. So, I mean, believe me, this issue is really important in terms of the economic development of our state. We have to have people that are productive. Everybody has to be productive. Everybody. We can't support an underclass. That's out of the question. The amount of dollars that go to social services is high, but why is that? Why is nobody looking at how to realistically reduce that amount at the front end? Oh boy.
It's right in a way. Shortly after President Obama's re-election, National Urban League President Mark Morial sent an urgent petition to the President and Congress asking that Obama's second term focus on economic opportunity and income inequality. Should that be a priority for Governor Chafee's administration as well?
Read that one more time.
Urban League President Mark Morial sent an urgent petition to the President and Congress asking that Obama's second term focus on economic opportunity and income inequality. Should that be a priority for Governor Chafee as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely, for all the reasons that I've stated up to this point. We have a state that is one of the most diverse states in the country, and we have disparities in income and poverty that is amongst the greatest in the country. I think the poverty in terms of Latinos is the highest in the country here in Rhode Island, I think. I'm not quite sure about that, but I've heard anecdotes to suggest that. That's the largest population growth that we're going to be experiencing over the next 10 years. So we got to do something about that. This is all logical if you really just take it at basis. Mm-hmm. So yes, we do have to do something about that because we need everybody to be productive in helping with our economy. And so everybody needs to be educated and trained. Everybody, not just certain people. People of color have to be educated and trained because if they are not, they're not going to be able to get the jobs in the new economy. All right, so what's going to happen? They're going to be part of the social services system that we as taxpayers have to support with dollars that we don't have.
Yeah.
So it's in our own interest to make sure that everybody's a tax producer as opposed to somebody that we have to take care of.
What specific recommendations do you have for the governor in tackling that?
The governor has actually, he's talked about education quite a bit, and I applaud him for that. We got to drill down deeper in terms of going all the way down into grammar school and make sure that the education system at the primary school level, middle school level, we have to make sure that those children are able to not just learn, but they're able to succeed, because that's our future, that's our population. So, people have to be prepared for those 21st century jobs. They have to stay in school. They have to have a realistic expectation that they can get those jobs. We have to end the bias. Okay, I saw something somewhere where there was an African American woman with a college degree that was applying for jobs, but because she had an African sounding name, she was having a hard time. She changed the name to kind of like an Anglo-sized name, and she was flooded with job opportunities. So I mean, there's clearly this bias in hiring. So we have to admit to it, address it, and we have to have people that are at the top, the CEOs, own it and say, look, that's not going to happen. We're going to have the best and the brightest, especially when people have worked hard and played by the rules. They have to be given an equal chance at gainful employment. They can't be a victim of somebody who knew somebody, or cousins, and that has to end. And
there's laws on the book already that tries to end that. Do you think they're not being enforced enough?
Not being enforced enough. Not at all. Yeah, maybe. The playing field just isn't level. I mean, there are people that I know that are really qualified people, and they seem they can't get a job, and I wonder about that. And so it's not that they're not trained or educated. They are. But yet they can't get a job. They're forced to leave our state, and these are people that were born in our state. And, okay, the recession is part of that, but there's bias as well. There really is.
Are qualified minority workers leaving Rhode Island in search of
Yes,
jobs?
they are.
Do you have any sense of what percentage?
I don't have any sense of what percentage. I just clearly just anecdotal evidence. There's no study that I can cite, but I know that we have people that are leaving. I mean, you have young people leaving in general, so I'm not trying to say that that's not the case. But we need to have a diverse workforce at all levels, especially at the top. We really don't have. You look around at companies and agencies, and you look at it on senior staff. You really don't see people of color anywhere.
So if you see that, maybe they'd be more likely to stay?
They'll be more likely to stay because they'll have the mentors that help people, that tend to make a difference in retention. They'll have more of a career path that they'll feel comfortable, that they work harder, that they can realistically move up, and that they're not going to be beaten out by somebody else that's less qualified, which means they're going to throw up their hands and just leave. Too often than not, people leave because they see somebody else moving up that is less qualified from them. Everybody knows it. And then when they see that and they feel powerless to do anything about it, so they give up and they just leave. And that happens too often. Too often. Not just in Rhode Island, everywhere, but I'm talking about Rhode Island. It happens here.
So have you picked up the phone and called the governor to urge him to tackle these problems?
I haven't picked up the phone and called the governor because it's not just the governor's problem.
Yeah.
It's all our problems. I wouldn't put everything on anybody. The governor has a role, but we all have a role. The movers and the shakers of the state has a role. My email to them is that we are not living in a post-racial society. Barack Obama is the president, but too many of them I think they really believe that we're living in a post-racial society, because I think things are getting worse, not better, for people of color in this state.
Even though it's everyone's problem, if you're the voice of the voiceless, why wouldn't you call the governor?
Oh, no, I will call the governor and talk to him about a variety of things. Economic development, for example. The percentage of people of color that have state contracts should be higher.
Yeah.
It's almost non-existent. So, that's a conversation I would like to have with the governor. How do we get, businesses and others more involved in terms of state contract? How do we get people more involved in state government at the highest levels? But I think in terms of if I had to talk to them about what's probably most important, it's the education system.
And have you spoken with him?
Haven't spoken with him yet, but I intend to speak with him soon.
Okay.
But because I haven't spoken to him yet, because I didn't think that he was the person that could solve all of this. I've talked to a lot of people, but certainly he's on my list of people to speak to. And,
who do you go to the most up there, or is there somebody that?
I really haven't. You know, I'm not so sure that it's government, that can solve all our problems. I know that's a cliche, but I think it's the private sector too. I mean, you got to have people, the captains of industry. They need to understand that you need the best and the brightest of all colors, of all backgrounds. You know, that's the level of people that have the qualifications. But we have a problem with unemployment, and we have a problem with people caught up in the social service network, which costs us a tremendous amount of tax dollars. I think the biggest way to kind of alleviate that, it's not going to eliminate that, is to have a better education system, maybe looking at the junior colleges to be more creative and more innovative in terms of those associate degree programs, looking at the nursing programs, supporting all of those things, but really reaching out in a meaningful way to those communities. I don't see any meaningful outreach by anybody.
So if nobody's doing the outreach, why don't you outreach to them, or do you?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
To private businesses as well?
I do. Private business as well, in terms of finding out where the job opportunities are and letting the community know where they are. Most jobs that are available are kind of hidden. They're not in the Providence Journal per se. They're not, they might be on they might be on the website or whatever, but not everybody, has a computer. So what I do is I have like 40 or 50 different companies and agencies and institutions that routinely give me their job postings. And then I have a database of over 1,000 people, and I get it out to them. So that, in my own small way, is the way I try to tackle that. Mm-hmm. How I'm proactively tackling that. Because I feel that if people just know about the opportunity, they'll get the job, unless there's bias, because they're qualified. There's so many qualified people that are either underemployed or unemployed in those communities that it's just shameful. And I think that if we can match the opportunity with the folks that are looking, I think that's going to be a part of the solution. Talk
about that kind of outreach and inclusion again. States, colleges, manufacturers, they're all kind of talking about the same thing now. How do we produce kids who can do the jobs that big people are going to do in the 21st century? So the first time ever, colleges are talking to one another. They're talking to business leaders. Are they talking to minority groups? Have you been included in these conversations?
By and large, no. I have talked to I have talked to some college presidents, but it's more to get to start a relationship.
Introduce.
Yeah. We're starting a relationship, so I'm hopeful, but nobody has really said, Jim, I want to sit down and talk to you about that issue. Nobody has and maybe they sat down with somebody else and talked about that, but they haven't talked to me about that issue. And I'm a little, and I wish they would. I wish they would, because we got to work together on this. Obviously, I kind of have the pulse of the community somewhat because of all the different affiliations that I have. So I'm a good person that I think you can talk to get an idea of how to get people engaged.
So when the new Brown president came, did you reach out to her right away and introduce, or how long does it take to get to that conversation that you want to have?
Actually, there's a reception that the NAACP and Black Heritage Society and the Rhode Island Black Business Association and Urban League is having next Monday to introduce we're having a reception with the Brown president.
Okay.
So I am working with other people to have a meeting with the Brown president, welcoming her to Rhode Island. So that will happen next Monday on the 10th. And
how much of that building the relationship, how long does that take before you get to the conversation you really want to have with her?
I don't think it will take long. I think I think that if the person is coming with the right attitude in terms of wanting to be a significant player here in Rhode Island, want to be helpful, that they're going to reach out to people that they feel can help, and they're going to embrace them, and they're going to listen to them, and they're going to make sure that they don't leave anybody that has value on the sidelines. So I'm optimistic in terms of meeting the president of Brown. I've already met with the president of URI. I've met with the president of RIC. In terms of getting to know each other.
Mm-hmm.
Huh?
Johnson Wells.
Johnson Wells, we serve on the College Crusade board together, but we really haven't been able to talk too much because it's a board meeting. And then Ray Pasquale, I haven't really been able to meet with him. But I think that's important. Education is important because we have to have people that are that are trained and educated in order to take advantage of these jobs. So you're exactly right about that. This community is too large to ignore. If you do, then whatever plans you have, it's just not going to work, because you have this great underclass that you got to support. At the same time, you're trying to grow yourself into prosperity. I think growing ourselves into prosperity can happen, but not at the same time having to take care of an increasing underclass. The two things are diametrically opposed. We have to make sure that that potential underclass is also ready, willing, and able to plug in to working within the system of new economy, whatever. And we have to make sure that they're ready. And like I said, at the preschool level, when we see that black dropout rate is X, everybody in Rhode Island should be alarmed by that, because that threatens everybody. It's not some other person's problem. It's not because we're a small state. What affects one is going to affect all eventually. And I think I'm laying out the case because of the fact that what are we going to do? I mean, we have to take care of people. They're in the DCYF system. They're in the training school system. Those are taxpayer dollars. Those are not dollars that come from somebody else. Those are dollars that come from us. So now we can't invest as much because we don't have as much disposable income.
Do you think that state employees have preconceived ideas of minorities when hiring?
I do. I think there's a bias against people of color, of all people of color. They don't think that they're as smart, or they don't think that they are as good as, well, let me say, they probably don't think that they are as capable. I think that not everybody, but there's too large a group that feels that way. And I think a lot of that is because they're not comfortable. They don't know people of color. They've lived in lives that were devoid of people of color, so they're not comfortable. They're leery. But I do think that
fear of the unknown.
Yeah, fear of the unknown. But once I think that they end up working with people of color and see how extraordinarily talented they are, they're the biggest advocates. They're like, wow. I mean, who's the biggest advocates nationally in terms of affirmative action? It's the military, okay? It's the higher education, and it's those places that has made that leap in terms of diversifying their student bodies and workforce, and they've seen the value of diversity firsthand. So, the Fortune 500, those companies, they know the value of diversity because they see it in their bottom line. Why would you play on half a playing field? Why not use the whole playing field? Some of the most talented and the most intelligent people in this state are people of color. And they're not being utilized. They're not being talked to. They're not being consulted with. They're being ignored. And that's a part of the reasons why the state is stagnant, because we're not using all our resources. We feel that we can do it without them, and we can't. It's not going to work.
So is our governor and our mayors doing their part to employ minorities? You said
they could do a lot better. They could do a lot better. They could do a lot better. And I think they know that. But they got to reach out in meaningful ways. I want to see an honest effort. It's not easy, but with an honest effort, things can dramatically change. We might not get to exactly where we all collectively want to be, but I want to see that honest effort. I haven't seen that.
At the Reinvent meeting that you were at, where you spoke with Ms. Merchant, she had said that some minorities lack the confidence to apply to jobs. Did you agree with that?
I was shocked at that general sweeping statement. How can you categorize a group of people, maybe from like 100 different countries, as well as African Americans? How can you make a blanket statement like that? I was flabbergasted by that statement, and I was saddened by it. And I wasn't the only one.
Yeah.
Trust me. I talked to a lot of people afterwards, and it blew them away. But I was told that she's not an aberration. She's really indicative of the people that are here. That I shouldn't have been surprised because more people that are the heads of companies here think like her, and that, you know, she's indicative of what's here. And so I was taken aback, and I immediately felt that, boy, our task is much more daunting than I thought it was.
So when you hear that, what do you think your task is for those type of people?
You got to educate those people that, you know, people of color are as confident and have as much guts as anybody. They might not have more, but they certainly don't have less. People are people. We have to get out of this idea of people are different based on their color. People are people.
So what?
And to co-sign people of color into a situation where they're less confident or less guts with no evidence, just to make sweeping statements, I thought was irresponsible.
What do you do as the NAACP with
Educate.
Once you hear that? So you go out. Have you reached out to her already?
She said she was going to reach out to me.
Good.
She hasn't. So there you have it. I can't reach out to everybody because there's hundreds of people that I would have to reach out to.
Mm-hmm.
But I certainly would reach out to her. You know, it's in her interest to have the best people working for her. How in a state where almost 40% of the people are people of color and you have nobody? I think she mentioned she had a couple of Cape Verdeans, but other than that, everybody else she mentioned when she said diversity was a European, Polish, Russian, you know. Mm-hmm. So certainly, I don't see that as that's not the kind of diversity I'm talking about when I'm talking about diversity. You know, certainly when you don't reach out to everybody to get the best, then you're hurting your own company. That's like the Red Sox saying, we're not going to go to the Caribbean or Asia to get any players because we are going to just do it with Americans. We're going to do it Americans. You know, they would never make the playoffs. Okay, they would never make the playoffs. Okay.
Do you like sports?
I do. So if you know that 40% of your state are people of color and you have nobody, how do you feel that you got the best and the brightest in your company when you're leaving almost half the state off the table? It's up to you to go and reach out, not for the people. The people are scrambling, trying to find jobs. They're trying to feed their families. They're trying to find jobs as anywhere they can to feed their families. So they're applying to 100 jobs.
Yeah.
So, but if they don't know that you have an opportunity, how can you blame a person that don't know?
Yeah.
That's pretty disingenuous, you know. But if we know and we are not as qualified as somebody else, then that's fine. I want people to increase the pool of people, you know, and then we'll rise and fall on our own merits. But you know, we don't have an Uncle Johnny to call, you know. We're not the grandson of somebody. We don't have that. But that person, by and large, is not going to be the best person anyway, 9 times out of 10. You got to reach out to people in those communities where you have some people that are stars, some people that are average, some people that are not as good, like any other community. But the stars in those communities, you're leaving them right off the table because you're not looking at demographics and saying, you know what, we need to go out in those communities and see if there's anybody that is competitive in terms of some of these positions. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. Yeah. But when you say you put something on a website, or you know, and most of the people don't even they even with computers probably don't even know to access that. You know, then you can say, okay, well, they didn't apply, but who does that hurt? That hurts you. Yeah. Ultimately, that hurts your company. That hurts the state. It might hurt this job seeker that doesn't get that particular position, but you want your best team. And too many companies and agencies where they don't have their best team. How can you have your best team when you know, your senior staffs are basically 90% white almost at every institution, every agency, every company in this state? Their senior staff is 90% or better white in a state that maybe 60% of the adult population is white. I mean, how do you think you have the best team? If this was the Red Sox and you had nobody of color at all on your team, you probably would think you're not going to make the playoffs, and you'd be right. If you had all right-handers, nobody left-handed on your team, you probably wouldn't make the playoffs, and you'd be right.
Do you think NAACP has to change its role and be more active with training minorities to look for those advertisements in the
I think it's a two-way street. I do, but I think it's a two-way street. I think it's for those people to reach out to the NAACP and say, look, you know, and some people do. Like law enforcement, for example. Whenever a municipality in Rhode Island these days is looking for you know, people of color to be on their police forces, I usually do get a call. So there are people doing the kind of outreach that I'm talking about. Municipalities that have, that are looking for police and fire. So I see evidence of that, but I don't see evidence of that in other areas where people are reaching out to us. I mean, every state has NAACP. You don't have to, be a genius to know that if you want to reach out to black people, maybe you should call the NAACP Urban League.
Yeah.
If you don't do that, you clearly don't want to reach out to that population, as far as I'm concerned. Because if you did, I'm just a phone call away. And so, I mean, come on.
Yeah. But do you think NAACP should do something different and reach out to the minorities to teach them and train them how to search for the jobs better?
Well, I mean, I would say yes. I mean, NAACP as well as others. We are doing that, though. We are
training?
Well, not so much training, but we are letting, in concert with Rhode Island Affirmative Action Professionals. I got to make sure I mention that. Rhode Island Affirmative Action Professionals is really a leader in this area, and I'm the president of that group as well. Okay, they for years have been, meeting with people that are HR directors and CEOs and saying, look, if you have a position open, let us know. So what we do with our database, we let the community know, and you know how that goes. If somebody knows about it, they're going to tell 5 people who's going to tell 5 people. So the community really does know, when certain jobs are available. We need more people to let us know about the opportunity. If every CEO or HR director let me know when there's a job posting, trust me, their applicant pool would not only grow, but the quality of that applicant pool would be increased substantially. The quality would be increased substantially because you'd be getting the best of Africa, of Asia, of Latin America, of the African American, the best of that pool, which now you don't get any because you're not reaching out.
There's only like 50 or 60 agencies that reach to you now.
50 or 60 companies.
Been that level?
I'd say about 15 years.
Okay.
15
so it's
years.
Never increased?
No, it has been increasing. It started with 10, 20. Now it's up to about 60. It's about 60 companies, institutions, and agencies that do reach out to the Rhode Island Affirmative Action Professionals. And, should it be more? Of course.
How do you get more?
You have to call them. You have to reach out to them and say, look, we are here. Hey, we're here. And if you have openings, please, send them to us. And we'll send it to the community. There's no guarantee of numbers of applicants or whatever, and we don't expect you to have a certain amount of people you're going to hire. We'll let it play out the way it plays out. We want to increase the applicant pool, but not increase the applicant pool. We want to diversify the applicant pool, which in turn will make it increase 9 times out of 10. And then you pick who you think is best. I mean, for example, my example, when that job was posted in the Bay State Banner in Boston, I saw it. So I came down, because I knew about the opportunity. And I was competing against Rhode Islanders. All right? So my credentials was against their credentials. And I was able to get the job. And I stayed and became, somebody that was really concerned about the community and branched off more than just having a job in Rhode Island. So there's all kind of other benefits by having people like me get jobs, because then we become part of the community and help build community, because the community has to be built in a lot of other ways other than just getting a job. So that's important.
So you have a team in place there, or are you the only one?
No, I have a team in place.
Okay.
I have a team in place.
Because you have and I'm just making this observation, you chair or lead so many organizations. Is the NAACP have a good
executive committee
group of young people
Yes.
to take the place?
Yes.
I mean, I know a lot of
Yes.
these agencies are older, and a lot of older people.
Is it growing?
No, NAACP is growing, and I'm proud to say that most of the people that are on my executive committee are in their late 20s and 30s.
How many are in your executive committee?
About 12.
And how many are in their late 20s, 30s?
I'd say half.
Okay.
Half of the people in the late 20s and 30s, which, that would probably surprise some people.
Yeah.
My legal redress chairperson, for example, is 29 years old. All right? My political action committee chair is 28 years old. All right?
And was that deliberate?
I am constantly looking at young people, in terms of, reaching out to Rhode Island young professionals, the sororities and fraternities. I'm constantly reaching out to them anyway. Mm-hmm. So some of them have taken an interest in groups like the NAACP and Affirmative Action Professionals. So
how many members do you have?
we have, we like to get into numbers. We have We have a lot of members.
Yeah.
Yeah, the NAACP has a policy, I'm not getting into that. But we have a lot of members. We have a lot of members, and it's growing. And it's growing.
And
But
they all pay dues?
yes, membership is $30 a year. So we encourage everybody in Rhode Island to become a member.
And what do you do with the money?
The money goes to keep our operations moving. We have an office in Eddy Street, so it keeps our office moving. It also helps us in terms of we have a youth council that we support. We support the youngsters. So all that takes money. But no, I want to make sure that I'm constantly reaching out to younger people. If people that are my age want to join, that's fine, that's great. And we do have people that are even in their 80s that faithfully come to NAACP meetings. You couldn't stop them from coming because they're true believers, and they're my mentors. Mm-hmm. We have a group of people in their 80s. You probably know them, Joan and Cliff Moore, are two of them. So we have a very diverse, age-wise, NAACP. I'm very proud of that. Very proud of that. Because I know that if you didn't have young people, then the agency would die. I mean, the organization would die. I understand that. And I think some of our best and our brightest are our young folks. They're creative, they're amazingly innovative, and we need to listen to them because they have great ideas. I learned from them.
So you're clearly doing a lot. The question is...
We are doing a lot. NAACP.
The group is doing a lot. But everyone agrees the state's in a crisis.
We're in a crisis.
And demographics say that you have the numbers on your side, in a way. Have you been aggressive enough? Do you need to be more aggressive?
I think I need to be more aggressive.
Yeah.
I think I need to be more aggressive. I think, I know Deborah Gist, Commissioner Gist, and we've talked, and many times. She's been on my show.
Yeah.
A couple of times. I know, like I said, Nancy Carullo, she's been on my show. But I guess it needs to be a more concerted effort. And we need more people. I need more help.
Yeah.
I need more help.
Yeah.
I'm asking for help because obviously, the state is small, but it's a lot of people involved. And for me to be with everybody, it's just too much.
If you had the help, what are some specific things that you'd want to take the NAACP towards? I know with ACLU, they kind of take a stance when they see something wrong. Is that something you want to start to get into, like where you really like?
No, we do. Whenever we see something we think is going to be harmful to our community, that's what we're based on. Just anti-bigotry, anti-discrimination, anti-bias. For example, when the photo ID thing was being proposed, NAACP was adamantly against it because we felt it would disproportionately affect people of color negatively.
Yeah.
Because they tend not to have those photo IDs, and it doesn't matter why they don't have it. They don't have it.
Yeah.
So we fought that battle and lost. When an off-duty police officer was beat up at his home apprehending a suspect by other police officers, we were among the first to speak out that we wanted an investigation of that because we do not want another Cornell Young incident ever again in this state. And then most recently, we spoke out in terms of the fact that we feel that Charles O'Dimway, the CEO of RIPTA, should be immediately reinstated. RIPTA's not the only quasi-public or state agency that has problems. So how come those directors are not put on paid administrative leave? How come they're not studies at other places? I see that as being a double standard. Why here?
So what would you do if you had more people? Would you speak up more? Would you?
No, I don't know if it's speaking up more. I think it's more the outreach in terms of doing things more with the youth, doing things more in terms of the bills that come up on the Hill, having people that go to the hearings, being able to talk more to the CEOs and other college presidents or whatever to make sure that they understand that diversity and inclusion is more important now than ever before, and that we are not living in a post-racial society just because President Barack Obama was elected. I feel things are worse for people of color here since he was elected because of I think that people feel that everything is fine, and we don't need to do anything in terms of those communities anymore, and that's faulty on a lot of different levels. But I've talked to people and they feel the same way. People seem to feel, well, they're fine. They have a president now. We don't have to do anything.
What is the NAACP's executive board doing to get the help that you feel they need?
Constant recruitment. constant recruitment. Wherever I go, I'm always asking people, please consider joining the NAACP. I'm recruiting on email, Facebook. I go to a lot of events. I recruit at events. We make an appeal everywhere. Anybody that's concerned about issues of fairness should consider joining the NAACP and helping us out. We are not an all African American or black organization. We are inclusive of everyone. Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, Native American. There's there's a feeling that if you're white, you can't join the NAACP. Nothing could be further than the truth. Some of the best people in terms of these issues are from the white community, and we embrace them as our brothers and sisters.
What is the makeup of the membership? I know you don't talk about numbers, but
the membership is diverse. It's probably similar to it's diverse, predominantly African American, but very diverse. We have members of all the groups that I mentioned.
okay.
How am I doing? I have no
We've
idea.
gone through most of these questions.
Huh?
I think we've gone through most of these questions.
Am I answering them correctly now? Let's see.
I don't know if these are
Are
right
they
way or
truthful?
wrong way.
They're truthful.
Then there you go.
Yeah.
You can't go wrong with truthful.
Speak the truth. Not everybody like the truth, though.
Did you literally see bulldozers knock down your apartment, your house?
No, yeah. Matter of fact, I did. We moved across the street.
Yeah.
So I did. They were supposed to build elderly housing, but what they ended up doing, they built a playground.
Mm.
Ouch. However, I just thank God the fact that we found a place across the street, because I wanted to keep the same friends and school and church and your whole world. I didn't want it to be disrupted at the age of 15. So that, I think, is why I'm here now, because of that.
Yeah.
That happening is my life has been giving back to communities. I understand how it feels to be, not the victim, but to be on the other end of, let's say, government action.
Mm.
When I was in high school, my guidance counselor told me maybe I should go to into the service, or get a job, or maybe go to the state college. And when I told him what I was planning to do, he wasn't happy with me. He said, "Why would you want to go to school in New Hampshire?" This is my guidance counselor. Why would I want to go to school in New Hampshire? I had applied to Dartmouth College, and he was asking me why I would want to do that. So racism has been a part of my life, my whole life.
Are you married?
No?
So I'm about to say, you're never home, it sounds like. So.
I'm single, no kids. Well, actually, I don't want to say it like that.
Yeah.
No, I'm just not married. But don't say anything, because I do have a significant other. She has a couple of daughters, so I don't want them reading anything that sounds off.
And how old are you now?
That's an easy question.
Yeah.
That's too easy.
I know.
I'm 60. I'm 61.
A young looking 60.
61. Now, Alisha doesn't think I look young. 'Cause I know her father. He's around there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I hope this is helpful. But my intent is to try to light a fire to
Yeah.
get people to start getting out of their comfort zone. I think everybody's comfortable thinking, "Oh, we're doing okay."